Yeah, some of you were saying, look, let's leave it a couple of episodes before we do an airport again. So here we are that's the skyscape of Minneapolis. That, I think, is a set from the Blues Brothers. Lots of cop cars, meaning I may have to behave myself temporarily. It's hello from Minneapolis. We've moved from Houston. And I thought it was maybe worth sharing an anecdote from yesterday. The temperature's dropped hugely. It's now about 21 degrees. It's going to be raining. It feels like an enormous pendulum swing from the sometimes 40-degree heat of Texas. But what is a change is we've now got 3 days producing features and interviews and training before we have another match. After last night's match, which was Panama, giving Steve McLaren's Jamaica a good old spanking, it was interesting to review what happened yesterday, and it's a little bit of chitter-chatter, not gossip, for those of you who like Premier League football. It's interesting to review what happened yesterday in light of the way my career has gone. So for 38 years, I've had the attitude that it's not embarrassing to be the little orange webbed feet underneath the big, glorious, long neck, white fleeced swan. A lot of people in life, not just other journalists, love to be the ones who look effortless and elegant. And I don't give a shit about admitting and showing that I'm blue collar, that I work hard, that I adopted without knowing that he coined it in the 60s, Gary Player's phrase about the harder I work, the luckier I get. When I worked for about a year and a half with Jackie Stewart and his son, Mark and Paul, in Paul Stewart Racing, Jackie used that phrase a lot in trying to educate those who are around him about the harder I work, the luckier I get. He meant it about his driving Formula One championships, which he won twice, but he meant it about his later life too, and it's proven to be correct. And for me, an example would be that reading World Soccer and reading about the way in which Jean-Marc Bosman's life had disintegrated, phoning a friend in Belgium, getting Jean-Marc Bosman's home number, telling my boss there was a human story, never mind the intricate bureaucratic story, being sent out the next morning, arriving in Belgium, talking my way into Bosman's house or his parents' house in Liège, being there when the phone rang for his lawyer to say, you've won your case. Amazing coincidence. The harder I worked, the luckier I got. It changed my life. It changed my career. A smaller example was last night after that Panama-Jamaica game, because on the touchline for Jamaica, the Reggae Boys, was Michail Antonio. Now, Michail Antonio, as you all well know, was the victim of a very, very dangerous car smash that at the time I remember people hoping hadn't cost him his life back in December 24, not that long ago. Initially, there were fears for his mobility and then his career, and he's played at this tournament. Okay, in the first couple of games for Jamaica, a handful of minutes. Last night, a little bit longer, not quite quarter of an hour, but nearly. And it felt miraculous. Now, the harder you work thing was that there was a lot of duties to attend to. The winners were Panama. It was nice to speak to the hat-trick hero. These are things that our bosses expect us to provide. But Michail Antonio seemed to me to be an heroic story or a miraculous story, because really he shouldn't have been back. Now, I gave him respect and waited for him in the mixed zone. The mixed zone is not the super flash. That's what takes place. You see it in Champions League nights, where you get one of the gasping out of breath players on the pitch doing an immediate interview, a snapshot view. Nor is it the flash zone, where television stations who've spent hundreds of millions in some tournaments get to speak one-on-one with footballers a little bit after the final whistle. It's the mix zone, where usually the power of the elbow is important. Not elbow grease in terms of the harder you work, the luckier you get, but elbowing people out of the way. Last night was completely different and demoralising, because the mix zone was empty. There was Jimena and I, my camera operator, and we waited and we waited and we waited. The Reggae Boys, one by one, walked outside the mix zone and didn't want to speak, but Michail Antonio stopped and he did speak. Now, it wasn't earth-shattering, but it was interesting, because it was about a guy's heroic efforts to get himself back mobile and then fit and then playing at a time when many people had feared for his career being ended. I gave him the respect again of talking to him first about how pissed off he would be about Jamaica not qualifying through the group, which they were, and he was. But then he talked about sacrifices. Then he talked about mental strength, the fear he'd had in starting to run or put weight on the smashed up knee joints and ankle joints. And what we got in the end was him talking about what a test of his character, a test of his determination and perseverance it had been to get back. If my arithmetic's correct, he's out of contract with West Ham, but he's fit and back again. If you liked as a coach, or even as West Ham's coach, what Mikel Antonio has been doing in the latter part of his career, he's beginning to look as if he can do that again. The message he left us with after a sort of 10-minute interview, which I really enjoyed, and he used the word miracle too, was that he's determined to join Jamaica's World Cup qualifying campaign. His arithmetic told him that it was going to be 28 years since Jamaica had qualified for the World Cup. And he wants to be back, fit, firing, and leading, if not West Ham in the Premier League next year, then leading Jamaica to the World Cup. I found it an interesting interview. All I'm doing is trying to lift the lid a little bit on what it takes. Standing there in an empty stadium, in an empty mixed zone, just waiting until the opportunity presents itself and then persuading Mikel Antonio, who was generous and gracious about stopping to talk about his recuperation, about the test, about the human drama he's been through. It made the day extra worthwhile. We finished our work, we got out of there, and we've moved to Minneapolis, up near Chicago, even nearer Canada, where the build up to the quarterfinals will start taking place. I don't know if it's interesting, but I thought I'd share. I'm that type. I'm a sharing kind. For that reason, stay tuned.